Hi, welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Jonelle.
And I'm Karen.
Each week, one of us brings a topic to the table, something we've been wrestling with, reading about, or noticing in our own lives. And the other relax in real time. No scripts, no prep, just honest, intergenerational, mother-daughter dialogue about what it means to wake up as white women in a world shaped by bias, power, and inherited privilege. We don't always agree, and it's not always comfortable, but we show up anyways. So let's wake up.
Hey, Jonelle.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
Good. Hey, this week I've gotten to talk to a couple listeners. I know sometimes you get to talk.
So fun. I did too, actually.
Did you too?
Now that I think about it, I had lunch with a listener. Okay.
I had lunch with a listener too.
Love it.
So anyways, one listener made a comment about every once in a while, we need to make sure that we're telling our listeners we're mother-daughter.
Yeah.
So whether we incorporate that in our intro or not, or we just make sure somewhere we say, hey, we're mother-daughter, because that definitely shapes our perspective.
It totally shapes our perspective. And clearly you told me earlier, because I kind of dropped it into the intro today. And I love that. I think first and foremost, we want to make sure it's a podcast about intergenerational conversations relating to bias, privilege, power. But I do think it is important, as you said, being mother-daughter shapes our conversations. I also think a lot of our hope, too, is to give the same dialogue or conversational power to a lot of mother-daughters out there that might not be able to have those conversations right now or have been having a hard time figuring out the dialogue. Because again, clearly, like we say, we don't always agree, but we walk out of here.
But we're trying to show up.
Yeah, we show up and we not to repeat ourselves, but we always walk out of here loving and respecting each other.
Yeah.
So it's not.
There's a few. No, I'm kidding. Hey,
wow, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here.
The other thing that was brought up, at least with this other listener, and I'm so glad she brought this up because she talked about our language of our word with experiencing trauma. And she talked about it in this space that being careful, what levels of trauma, and being sensitive, clarifying. And I thought, gosh, it's so true, because a lot of times, and maybe this is the challenge when we're having conversations, I'm looking at things contextual at this space, but I know that clearly there are very different levels of trauma. Yes. And so, I so appreciate this listener calling that out.
Yeah.
Because the last thing we want to do is trigger people into spaces that bring them more trauma.
Yeah.
So hopefully and this is something we're both trying to learn, or you're better than I am, is using my language, explicit
context,
language.
Being explicit in context. I always tell you about.
And clarity. Yeah. So anyways, I thought that was really interesting and insightful. So
great. I love that. Yeah. Well, I had some great feedback from a listener, too. It is funny that both of us had lunch with listeners this week. One around me not always doing the reflection or not always doing the homework.
Yes.
And so I do appreciate...
Boy, and if any of my students heard this podcast, I don't know if anyone's listening, they would know that is something I really get annoyed by.
And it's funny because I don't really realize how much I skip out on the homework or reflection. And that's never my intention. I think it's because I've done so much research for the topic. But anyway, so I'm going to be much more intentional about not skipping out. And I even have a great reflection
because we did
week.
Trad vibes.
So I have to say my reflection has nothing to do with the trad vibes.
Huh. What? Okay.
But here's the deal. I think reflection can still be daily life things that we're listening and learning to be authentic.
Yeah.
And so here's my reflection that brought about a great conversation too. I went and saw the musical Chicago with a friend this week. It was so fun. And we went to the Fifth Ave Theater in Seattle, which is one of our older theaters, and it is designed with like Chinese influence, so dragons and a very like intricate woodwork, and it's a beautiful theater. And I made the comment, I love the drama of this theater. And I thought about that for a second later, that could that have been unintentionally coded? Could that have been, and I think if this was maybe,
What do you mean?
so
Explain that.
So drama doesn't always have positive connotation to it. And so like when I'm describing another cultural's artwork with a term that doesn't always have positive connotation, could it be seen as coded? Now, again, that wasn't my intention.
Yeah.
And so I actually went with a friend who's Asian and stuff. And so I was able, we have open conversations all the time. And I was able to kind of bring that up. Like if she thought that could, because I think these are some of the self-reflection that's great all the time.
Yeah.
Like I'm not policing myself, but could that have been seen coded to someone else? And what I realized, what we talked about at this and all of this, because it was the context of a theater, and again, because of my nature, my friend did not find it coded in any way, shape, or form. But what I recognize about myself is my word still could have been much better to have no worries of coded language. And so my word could have been intricate as I use today.
Yeah.
It could have been something that definitely has a more neutral, if not positive tone.
Using an artistic vocabulary.
Or that. But the point is, it was just such a simple, like I don't want people to like overthink their language or they're so worried. But it was a good reminder to myself of like, okay, this word at this moment was not offensive in the way I used it. But there still are better words.
Yeah.
Just in case that did take offense to someone else.
Okay, we haven't talked about coded language, but I can give an example.
We have talked about coded language.
We have, but that wasn't our reflection. This is going on. But in logo design, there's a language called lockup. Oh. And a lockup but it's referenced back to the old printing press in which you lock up the elements within the press.
Okay.
And this particular time, I did think about coded language and that certain language can be triggering.
Yeah.
And that is kind of triggering to say lock up, that I decided to describe and show visually why it has that. So normally I would just say what it is.
Yeah.
But this time I said why it is. And I think that really did. It's interesting that you're talking about
it neutralizes
the potential
that
term.
Yes.
Right, yeah, because that term can't, especially with all the immigration stuff going on, can be very triggering. And so that was fun. I appreciate you bringing that up as a reflection.
I think it's just a good reminder to everyone that it is okay.
And it's also
to question these things and see, and not in like a shame-based way. I didn't shame myself. Like a friend, immediately my friend's reaction was like, oh no, like almost to soothe me as if I felt like I'd made a mistake. And I'm like, I appreciate that, but that's not, I'm just curious if that was a mistake or if it was, I wouldn't have felt necessarily shame around it, but like a good learning. And so, yeah, it just was a good reminder of kind of just continuing to check yourself whether you're right or wrong. I don't know.
Well, it's also about learning because I was able to, I don't know if I would have done that. I haven't done that in the past. So, but now because of our conversations about things, I did explicitly explain, I was explicit into why this term is being used.
Yeah.
Okay. I did do a reflection though.
Okay.
On the whole trad wife conversation. And I kind of haven't been able to sleep over it. I keep thinking about this.
This is really on your mind.
And I think the reason it's bothersome is more about relationships in the sense of, one of the things that I've learned over time and with therapy and so forth is when you're in an adult relationship, the goal is to enter that relationship adult to adult.
Yeah.
Not adult to child, they're adult to adult. So one of those key relationships we have is with our partners.
Yeah.
And I've really worked with your father, mother, daughter, whatever, to have a relationship that is adult to adult.
Yeah.
Yes, we can be silly and, you're silly and then you're both talking child to child. But most of the partnership is related to adult, which means I'm respecting his needs. He's respecting my needs. We're sharing in the space of this partnership and one is not greater than the other.
Yeah.
And I think what's so scary about, to me, this language of trad is it's rooted in the space of these traditional values. And my mom and dad did not have an adult to adult relationship. My mom was subservient to my father, and it was clear that it was my dad's way or the highway, and that my dad's way would win no matter what. That scares me because it takes away from shared responsibilities. It takes away from mutual respect. It takes away from certain avenues. And so I want to caution people. One of the reasons we moved away from that kind of modeling is so that we could be in partnership and adult to adult, not be in subservient relationships to to the other, not be in a space where there's a weird power dynamic, especially in our partnership relationships. We get enough of that everywhere else in the world. Why are we doing that within our home? So like I've been trying to, me, I don't like to condemn people's way of living, but I guess I want this more to be a cautionary space than to like judge.
I don't hear you condemning, because I think we've been very clear that it is not a quote unquote traditional household that we mind, where a woman stays home, free will. It is about the subservientness and the lack of choice, whether the person feels like they have choice over it. There is still there's a disbalance of
it's the disbalance of power. And I think actually it's funny, because I think that's one thing, as we've walked in this space longer, so many of these issues are that imbalance of power, that, almost all of them are.
Totally.
And one of the things that we're trying to do in a healthy space is to bring equilibrium back to empowering each other.
I would almost argue one step further, though I'd love to get to our topic, that I have is I do think most women nowadays recognize and do not want that power disemboweled. But I think where some of the bigger issues are, and this is where you talk about like the gap, the emotional literacy gap between men and women these days, is we didn't raise our boys to have the same emotional literacy, to see the same need for partnership as your generation raised women to be independent. And that is still the continued disconnect. So I almost more encourage, I don't think a lot of women are falling into that trap. I think it's more encouraging. How do we encourage our men to see the value and benefit of partnership?
And it's not about losing their masculinity. It's actually being adult to adult. So anyways, that was a reflection, and hopefully now that I've gotten it off my chest, I can sleep. Hey, so what's your topic?
So I had an interesting conversation with a neighbor of mine. This was a couple weeks ago, and I've kind of been sitting on this and thinking about this topic for a while. I wanted to do like accurate research, or just, I don't know. But this conversation really struck me. So I have a neighbor, lovely neighbor, love her. She's Latinx. And she brought up a comment that, and I don't know, I never thought about this, but she wants her kids to be in a duolingual preschool. So she speaks Spanish in the home. She wants to continue that, have them in an immersive environment. It's a dual language preschool. I guess the problem is, though, and I really started researching this, is dual language class models in dual language schools are becoming, quote unquote, almost gentrified. They're called what are metaphorically gentrified. Because you can't necessarily... But so they're being in the sense that what's happening is it's becoming, as you can imagine, it's becoming a really popular thing among upper middle class white families or upper class white families to immerse their kids in dual language schools to get that dual language experience. But what it does is it drives up the price of preschools.
Oh, well, that's
and it
your
pushes
generation.
out, out the native language speakers. And so so, and where I wanted to sit on this topic is, and kind of like do more research around it, is not because I did not take her perspective at face value. I was shocked kind of thing. Not shocked in the sense like you said, we see this all the time with everything, but it just was a new avenue of quote unquote gentrification that I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah.
But the research I wanted to do more was to kind of help our listeners understand, one, the impact, and two, like what they can actually, the execution. Because I see how, and maybe I'm talking too much here. Maybe I need you to jump in with your initial thoughts before I kind of go into mine.
It's interesting.
Sorry.
As you're saying all these things, it just reminds me of the value of public schools, right? And public preschools. And so when I don't know, I don't have a little one in preschool, but when you kids were little, the public spaces that we were involved in were heavily interested in, now whether they could maintain them or not, and maybe that's the bigger question we're asking here, offering a second language. And so one of the challenges, though, with public schools is they couldn't just say the only second language we're going to offer is Spanish. We're going to offer Japanese.
So that's not a Duolingo program.
Oh, okay.
That's a class. Duolingo is physically where you're only speaking the other language.
Oh.
In it. And so what, or a lot do is like you have 1 week Spanish, 1 week English.
Yeah.
And so you're fully immersed into it, everything.
Yeah. And what I hear you say is, if I'm correct, it's not that having these schools aren't amazing, because they sound amazing. And actually what is amazing is we all should have multiple languages to really be culturally literate.
Yeah.
And yet these are only happening with people who can actually really afford it.
Well, not now they are, not necessarily.
Okay.
In the past, so in the past, these programs were actually started in, I believe, the 60s or 70s. I apologize to everyone. I cannot read my notes today because I just got my eyes dilated at the eye doctor. So we're going to have some fuzzy memory of notes. But so these programs actually became popular. They've been called like English as a second language program, dual language programs, the gamut. Like when I was growing up, it was called ESL.
Yeah.
And so essentially the intention was more...
But ESL was interesting because ESL was typically people who came with a dominant language and came to learn English as their second language.
Yes. So this is what I'm explaining, the evolution of it and why it's metaphorically being gentrified in a sense. And so ESL and those dual languages, like you said, the intent was to take a not a native English speaker and help them learn English so they can immerse themselves into regular classroom environment, not regular, that's into the English classroom environment. So they had a better opportunity to get good grades,
especially
to learn.
When the dominant language is English.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So, but since 2020, I believe now this one I really want to double check on
So I have to say...
Since 2010, these programs have quadrupled.
Wow.
So in the last 15 years, they have
quadrupled. So then we're hearing that there's a need.
So, but they have quadrupled. Yes, so we're hearing that there's a need, but the enrollment for English as a second language has dropped by 50%. So majority are being taken up by native English speakers.
Okay, so help me understand, what is your issue with this? Why is this a problem?
Yeah,
what is
this is what I'm getting into.
Yeah. Why do I as a white woman, I might have resources. Here's a question.
Yeah.
I as a white woman, I'm putting my kids in school. It costs X amount with daycare now.
Yeah.
It's not that that's free. So maybe one of the enticements is to go to a culturally immersive school.
Exactly.
So why is that a bad thing? I mean, wouldn't that be a good thing?
So this is why goes back to my original point of why I've been wrestling with how to approach this topic for us.
Okay.
Because I completely agree with, not only agree, I listen and respect what my neighbor said about how it's so frustrating because these preschools are now too expensive for her to send their kids to.
Okay.
So these communities have been pushed out, essentially. So this is the negative, is these communities have been pushed out. But where I wrestled with is, you also can't tell a parent who feels like they're doing, a white parent who feels like they're doing the best thing for their kid about immersing them in second language, like why this, like to your point, you have money, you want your kid to be educated, why wouldn't you do it? So this is where I've been wrestling of how to bring up the topic.
Yeah.
And what it came down to in my head when I finally am bringing it up today, and then maybe we can go into more some of the specific down impacts, is long-term intentionality. So some of the biggest issues is this is really mostly a trend for white people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an impact on the livelihood of an someone English as a second language, or Latinx communities, or, Chinese, Vietnamese, Thai communities. But for the white person, it's a moment in time. And so it's kind of...
it's a trend.
It's a trend.
You're seeing it as same as so many other trends that we take up.
Because
we do. Because of capitalism.
And that's the thing. And so
because they're looking for a different way to get people excited about this particular preschool. So then they're saying, let's come in.
And so when you start to look at it that way and being intentional, I'm not saying you cannot enroll your student in that. But think to yourself, are you, one, going to do the homework at home to then keep Spanish up in your home, to keep it up? Because the odds of a preschooler learning Spanish but keeping it up for the rest of their lives is longevity on the parents' part.
Yeah.
Are you going to keep it up and speak at home? Do you have Spanish books at home or the other languages at home that you are continuing to educate your child with?
And if you're not, you're then actually taking a place where someone, but I want to say that about all education. I want to say that half the time to my college kids.
Yeah.
It's like you're in this classroom, you're not willing to do the homework, you're not willing to do this stuff. Why are you taking this space? There is someone that is desperate to be in this space.
But that is our white privilege of entitlement.
Yeah.
Is we, as you just said 5 minutes ago, well, if I can afford it and it's local to me, like why wouldn't I want my student to do that?
So one of the things, though, I think a bigger question. So one of the things that doing this podcast has been really good for me, or just getting involved in these kind of dialogues, is often we go straight to the individual rather than the system or the policy. And so
love that you brought that up.
Yeah. So this shouldn't be an either or.
No.
Your neighbor should get to be able to do this. And someone who has the means to do it should be able to get to do this. Because first of all, we know the value of a second language.
Yeah.
There's a statistical analysis of the value of second language. So then what in our systems are making the obstacles? Is it A, that there's not enough subsidies or scholarships? Is it B, the requirement of how many students have to be to a teacher? I mean, there's so many regulations that are put on these spaces that do make them very, very expensive.
So let me give you some interesting facts and insight. So the one that I find the most interesting is they said that programs that are 50-50 of 50% non-native English and 50% English speakers do the best for both parties.
Yeah.
So having the immersive experience on both end, being equal and equitable from both sides of the language spectrum are the most progressive.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a great starting point from there. So it's not saying, no, don't let the native English speakers in. They actually help the non-native speakers.
Yeah.
Like they both help each other with language. But to your point, it goes about systems and boundaries and how can we create bigger regulations so we can make space for both communities.
Yeah, because if you're saying that's okay, we're not going to presume that the white person has more money than the person with the second, the non-native speaking person. So, but what we're saying is if it's 50-50.
But they do have more privilege.
Okay, but hear me out. If we're saying that it's 50-50, we want 50 kids that are fluent in Spanish, and we want 50 kids that are fluent in English, and we're going to merge them together. What would be a beautiful way of looking at this is then out of those 5 and 5, those 10 people, what are those costs, right?
Yeah.
And then could they tangibly figure out, can they actually be paid for?
Yeah.
And then if not, who needs what kind of subsidies to help drive that space?
So
this is the kind of policies we need to be working
So
on.
you brought up kind of a couple points there. So they do say, if you're a parent right now and this is important to your child's education, again, they say, make it then important to your child's peers' education.
Yeah.
If you have the time and the means to fight for scholarships, to support, or they even say if you're on the PTA, make sure the PTA is a divided 50-50.
Oh,
And
yes.
again, and so making sure you're having these equitable voices, because it's shown statistically that 50-50 actually helps both parties. And so
But
then here's the second thing about policy. So this is where gentrification comes into play. Is the programs that were initially built in these schools, it's 80% of these neighborhoods across the country. Most of the studies have been done in LA, Dallas, New York, and Chicago. Most of those are now gentrified neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So what was once serving minority communities are now serving white people, and they have not proportionally moved the programs to other schools. So that is also where, if you feel powerful of this school or this program in your school, it's fighting for the whole school district to share those programs as well. But what they're saying these school districts are doing is they're using them as selling points to not lose upper class donors to charter schools or private schools.
Yeah.
And so that's why systematically they're not adjusting.
And it's really complicated. So you went to a school that bused. And so you weren't bused, but the kids from the South End were bused to you. And so one of the things that you probably don't even remember this, one of the things that we would be do homework clubs where the kids were bused, so that we would go down to the South End. I don't know if you even came, because I might have just tutored down there, because you're talking about a lot of complicated things. First of all, we were asking, when busing sounded great, if you weren't the busser, right?
But this is not about busing. This is about bringing the program to the local school. So this is not about moving kids to other schools. This is about bringing, because they've learned in the busing did not work. So it's about bringing this
program would be like a small portal within the school. So
no, put it this way.
How are you getting these integrated students without, if one of the groups is living in one area, what happens to the other group?
That's a great question.
Yeah, because this is one of the things I was talking about. This idea,
so busing people different places.
We had to bus, but
they've seen time and time again that busing doesn't. It's
challenging.
Not an equitable
situation. Like I said, it was great for you because you lived within the confines of your neighborhood.
Yeah,
but it was very difficult for like some of your friends where they had to bus an hour each way to get to their classes.
I think,
and then another thing. No, I want to talk about this because another thing. Then what we would do is, because often these kids then wouldn't get home until 5, 6, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So we would have to do the neighborhood outreach down in their neighborhood late at night so that they could help with homework, help with these assistants, the same kind of tutoring you all were getting in the North End school near your home.
Yeah.
So there's these challenges, and I don't know the answer. I think whether it is offering scholarship, I don't know what the answer is.
But I think this is what I'm still. I think without even busing, even still having programs like that available, even if it's not 50-50, but still having it available to non-English speakers or English as a second language speakers is the most important part.
Yeah.
But we only have a few minutes left, so I kind of want to break down where I'm going with this. I think, like everything we talk about here, the most important thing is intentional longevity. I think I really understand the appeal and the desire to hop on and do what you think is best for your child in the moment. I am never going to disregard that. A parent knows what to do best, but think through the impacts of the long term if this is something you truly intend and you're going to do the work to keep up with
like you said, your financial resources. That's
what I was saying. But that would be the next point. And if you feel like this is really something through, then start pushing for other people to have that space, for other people to also get that same privilege, because it is, again, another white trend where we're pushing, pushing people out of their own community, essentially. Pushing people out of access to their own benefits.
Well, and one of the things I actually really appreciate you bringing this up, because sometimes, it's a little bit of a different road, but access to education is a women's issue.
Yes.
One of the things we learned from, hood feminism and womenish feminism is different than white feminism, is that it wasn't just about us getting to the table. It was about giving our children access. As women, it's important that our children have access to the best education. And it's not just access if we pray privately for that, but it's access to all. So we have a smart community.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you
What's our
everyone
reflection?
so much. I said the reflection.
Oh, sorry.
Think about longevity.
Oh, yeah. You did.
Where is your
Sorry.
extended impact?
Yeah,
okay.
Extended impact.
I'm trying here with reflection. Okay, anyways, thanks everyone for joining us on White Women Wake Up. We hope today's conversation sparks something in you, whether it's a reflection, a new question, or a deeper commitment to showing up with empathy and accountability. If you found this episode meaningful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. This will be our final October episode, and we have that October goal of sending it to 3 people, 3 new audience members. I think a lot of you out there have done this because we've definitely seen a little bump in our following, but we'd love if you could just keep pushing out the message to other people who you think need to hear it. And then you can also connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Substack, or at whitewomenwakeup.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love for you to be in our community and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, be open, and let's keep waking up.
Bye.
Bye. Wait, tell everyone what you call it. She had to be told it's ASMR.
I saw this guy doing a TikTok reel of ASMR of an industry. So everywhere he walked in, he would touch all the different parts of it, and it was really funny. ASMR.
You crack me up. You're so funny. Me too.